You can tell when a night is about to go wrong. There's always a moment, just one small, almost forgettable moment, where the air shifts. You can't explain it, but suddenly, things feel off. For me, that moment was during a New Year's Eve party in a rented house just outside Nashville. A big, high-ceiling cabin with too many rooms and not enough warmth. The kind of place that photographs beautifully. Garlands on the mantel, LED candles in every corner, polished wood floors, champagne flutes on silver trays. Perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. I was standing near the fireplace, nursing a drink I didn't even want, just watching people swirl around the room. Madison, my wife, had organized the whole thing. She always had a flair for that kind of thing. Event planning was her secret superpower, even if she wasn't technically in PR. She liked people seeing her name on the group chat, asking, "What should we bring?" Or, "Madison, what time should we be there?" She liked curating the vibe. And that night, she nailed it. Everyone was buzzing, laughing, complimenting her on the layout, the drinks, the Spotify playlist she spent 2 hours tweaking. I was proud of her. Or at least I told myself I was. The whole thing felt like a movie. Except I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't cast in the lead role. I was extra, supporting, the guy holding the coats. She was making rounds with Jason, a guy from her department at work. I'd heard the name before, Jason this, Jason that, nothing major. She mentioned him enough that I didn't think anything of it, which now feels like a joke all on its own. I'd met him once at her office Christmas party the year before. He was charming, smooth-talking, the kind of guy who always knows which bottle of wine to bring and when to duck out of small talk. The kind of guy who gets into your life without knocking. People had gathered around the makeshift bar for a toast just before midnight. Madison clinked her glass and raised it high, like the leading lady she always knew how to be. She started off with the usual stuff. "Thank you all for coming. What a year it's been. Let's hope the next one is even better." Everyone smiled, nodding, the way polite people do when they're waiting for their turn to speak. Then she pivoted. "I especially want to thank someone who really made this year something special for me." She turned slightly, looked across the room, and smiled not at me, not at our friends, but directly at Jason. "To Jason," she said, raising her glass toward him. "Thank you for a truly warm year. You showed me what it means to feel needed." My glass stopped halfway to my lips. I looked around. Surely someone else had heard that the way I did. But no one said anything. A few people glanced at each other. Some tried to smile and pretend it was fine. But the energy shifted. You could feel it. That cold, thin silence that slips between people when something isn't right. Jason smiled, casually, like he knew this was coming. Like it was some inside joke. My stomach twisted. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe she meant needed, like, professionally. Maybe she meant he covered her while she was out sick. Maybe it was just clumsy wording. But I couldn't shake the sound of it. "You showed me what it means to feel needed." I looked at Madison, and something in her face told me not to push it. But I couldn't stop myself. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. Not loud, but definitely not quiet either. Her expression didn't falter. If anything, she seemed amused, like a teacher correcting a child. "Oh, come on, Brandon," she said, still smiling. "It was a joke. God, you take everything so personally." And just like that, the conversation moved on without me. It was like someone had snapped their fingers and the whole room returned to normal. People laughed nervously, raised their glasses. Someone shouted, "Happy early New Year!" And the music crept back in, like nothing had happened. But I was stuck. I watched her slip an arm around Jason's shoulder as she posed for a group photo. I watched the way his hand brushed her back as they leaned in, not close enough to call out, but close enough to notice. I watched her avoid my eyes, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit for a long time. I didn't feel like her husband anymore. I felt like a stranger in her story. I stood there with a drink in my hand, blinking at the blinking lights. I must have looked calm. No yelling, no drama. But inside, I was sinking. Something had broken in that moment. Not loudly, not with shouts or slammed doors, but quietly, Like a hairline fracture you don't notice until the whole thing collapses. She didn't come over to explain. Didn't try to pull me aside or ask if I was okay. She just laughed, posed for more pictures, and kept that same smile pasted on her face like nothing had happened. I stepped outside for air. The cold hit me like a slap, a reminder that I was still real, still there, even if I no longer belonged in that room. There was a time when Madison would have followed me. Back when we were still learning each other, back when small silences mattered. Now, she didn't even glance toward the door. I stood on the porch, watching the fireworks in the distance, trying to understand what exactly had just happened. The sky was lit up in pinks and golds and whites, and all I could think about was how lonely I felt in a house full of people I knew. I wanted to believe it was just a poorly worded joke, that I was overreacting, that I did take things too personally, just like she said. But it didn't feel like overreacting. Felt like knowing. Like my gut had finally caught up to something my heart had been denying. We drove home separately that night. She stayed to clean up with a few others. I told her I was tired, but that was a lie. I just couldn't stand being in that room with her and him for another second. On the drive, I kept replaying it. The tone of her voice, the way she looked at him, how casual it all felt to her. I wondered how long I'd been the last to know. How long she'd been turning me into a punchline while I thought we were still building something real. When I got home, I sat in the dark living room and stared at the fireplace. Our own garland still hanging, drooping slightly on one end. We'd decorated it together a few weeks ago. She'd picked the color scheme. I'd handed her the hooks. Felt like that had happened in someone else's life. By the time she came in, a little after 1 a.m., I was already in the guest room, pretending to be asleep. She didn't knock, didn't check on me. I heard her heels click down the hallway, the soft thud of the bedroom door closing, and that was it. The new year had started, and I was already watching my marriage from the outside. That night, or technically that morning, I couldn't sleep. I checked into a cheap motel off the I-40. The kind where the parking lot smells like fried oil and cigarettes, and the heater makes clicking sounds that remind you the room was last updated during the Bush administration, the first one. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, still wearing the button-up from the party, still hearing her voice echo. You take everything too personally. Maybe I did. But that didn't mean I was wrong. I stared at the ceiling, the paint flaking, the air stale, and I started making a list in my head. Things I had shrugged off. Things I told myself weren't important. They didn't feel like clues at the time. Just little annoyances. Ordinary couple stuff. Until they all lined up like pins in a row, and I was the last idiot holding the bowling ball. It started around July. I remember because it was right after our anniversary. The one she forgot until the night before. She said work had been insane, that she'd make it up to me. I believed her. I always believed her. That was when she stopped leaving her phone out in the open. Used to be, we both just tossed our phones on the kitchen counter after work. Texts came in, calls, whatever, no big deal. But suddenly, hers started going straight into her purse, or face down, or under a pillow if she was on the couch. She claimed she was trying to disconnect. Digital detox. I bought that too. Except she wasn't disconnected. Not at all. She was just disconnected from me. Then there was Chicago. She'd gone for a 3-day work trip in late August. I remember how annoyed I was at the time, because we'd been planning to visit my parents that same weekend. She told me this conference came up last minute, and that it was really important for her team. High stakes. No way to skip it. So I stayed home and made excuses to my folks. On the second morning of her trip, I got a notification on my phone from a delivery app we both used. She forgot she'd linked it to our shared email. The message was simple. Your order has been delivered to room 1827, Palmer Hotel, Chicago. Enjoy your breakfast for 2. I stared at it for 5 minutes straight. Could have been for her and a colleague, I told myself. Could have been a mistake. Maybe she was just hungry. Maybe someone joined her for a meeting. I didn't ask. When she got home, I told her I hoped the trip went well. She said it was all meetings and no fun. Then went upstairs to shower. I didn't press, because I was afraid of the answer. That's the worst part of being lied to. It's not just the betrayal. It's how much you participate in it. I let her rewrite reality right in front of me. A few weeks after that, she started going to the gym more. Nothing suspicious about that. We'd both talked about getting healthier. She bought new gear, new water bottles, even a new duffel bag. Said she liked to go early in the morning before work or late at night when the place was empty. I told her I admired the discipline. But something started changing around then. She'd come home from the gym exhausted, but not the kind of exhausted you get from lifting weights or running. It was mental or emotional, like her body had been somewhere else entirely. Sometimes she'd just sit on the floor in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box, staring at nothing. I remember asking her one night, "Are you okay?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken in another language. "Yeah, just tired. Work's been a lot." That became her answer for everything. Work's been a lot. The problem is, she used to tell me everything about her job. Every annoying email, every stupid inside joke, every client call that went sideways. But around the time Jason started showing up in more stories, the details started disappearing. I'd ask how her day went and she'd say, "Same as always," and change the subject. She used to share. That was the difference. It wasn't just what she said. It was how little she said it. Then the mood shift started. At first, I chalked it up to stress. We were both stretched thin. But it wasn't just stress. It was resentment. Like everything I did became irritating to her. She started calling me boring, predictable, saying it with a smirk, but also with teeth. "You always order the same thing," she said once at a restaurant, when I asked for the same burger I always get. "You never want to try anything new." I joked, "That's why you married me, right? Safe and boring." She didn't laugh. The next week, we were watching a movie, something light, forgettable. She kept glancing at her phone. When I asked if she was waiting for a call, she said no, then turned it face down and dropped it in her lap. She didn't touch it again. But she also didn't really watch the movie. Her mind was somewhere else the whole time. I remember looking at her and thinking, she's gone. Not physically, not yet, but gone just the same. There was another time, a Friday night, when I came home early from work. I grabbed Thai takeout, her favorite, thinking I'd surprise her. But she wasn't there. Her gym bag was gone. So was her car. No big deal. I texted her, "Dinner's here. Hope you're hungry." No reply. An hour passed. Then 2. I started to worry. At 9:42 p.m. she finally texted back, "Sorry, lost track of time at the gym. On my way." She walked in 20 minutes later in leggings and a zip-up, hair damp, no sweat. She smelled like vanilla and something expensive. Not like someone who just spent 2 hours on a treadmill. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "You're the best." Then dug into the food like nothing happened. I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. Because the alternative was too painful. That this person I'd spent 7 years with was drifting away from me, toward someone else, and pretending everything was fine while I held the pieces. I sat on that motel bed that night, the TV on mute, a styrofoam cup of vending machine coffee in my hand, thinking about all the moments I'd brushed aside, all the signs, all the ways she had been leaving me long before she was actually gone. I thought about the way she started locking the bathroom door when she got ready for work, how she turned off read receipts on her messages, how she suddenly had a new group of work friends I'd never met, how she canceled our weekend plans more and more often, always with some vague excuse, how her laughter changed. It's hard to describe that, but I swear it did. She started laughing quieter, softer, like she was saving the real version for someone else. I hadn't heard her belly laugh, the real one, the one that came out in gasps and made her snort, in months. She used to laugh like that with me. And now I wasn't even sure if she noticed when I left a room. I started scrolling through my phone, through old photos of us. Trips, dinners, our anniversary last year, the one she didn't forget. There we were, sitting on a balcony in Asheville, wine in hand, her head on my shoulder. I looked at our faces and tried to figure out when the light went out. I couldn't find the exact moment. I think that's what made it worse. There was no before and after. just a long fade. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't feel angry yet, either. What I felt was small. Like I was shrinking inside my own life. Like I'd built a house, brick by brick, and someone had been quietly rearranging the walls while I slept. I checked the clock. 3:17 a.m. I texted her, just out of reflex. Made it to the motel. Didn't want to crash at the house tonight. Talk tomorrow. No reply. I don't even know why I sent it. She didn't care where I was. Not really. And the worst part? Neither did I. Not anymore. I went back to the house 2 days later. Not because I missed it. Not because I wanted answers. I told myself I needed clothes, documents, the basics. Things that were technically mine. Things I didn't want her touching. Madison wasn't home. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the doorknob, feeling like I was about to walk into someone else's life. The lock clicked open the same way it always had, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The house smelled wrong. Too clean. Like citrus and something floral. She'd been cleaning, deep cleaning, the kind people do when they're trying to erase something. I started in the bedroom, moving slowly, methodically. I wasn't looking for proof. Not consciously. I think part of me still hoped I was wrong. That I'd imagined patterns where there were none. That the toast, the distance, the motel night, all of it could still be explained away if I didn't find anything solid. Her gym bag was by the closet door. I almost walked past it. But something about how carefully it was zipped caught my attention. Madison was never careful with her things. She tossed bags, lost keys, forgot where she put everything. This bag looked intentional, like it had been packed and repacked. I sat on the edge of the bed and unzipped it. Right on top was an envelope. Not hidden, not buried, just sitting there waiting. Inside were vouchers, printed confirmations, hotel stationery, a suite in Atlanta, booked for a weekend. Her name and Jason's name, side by side. No excuses, no wiggle room, just black ink on white paper, dated 3 weeks earlier, a weekend she told me she was visiting college friends. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I kept going. There were letters, actual letters, folded neatly, stacked by date, oldest at the bottom. The earliest one was nearly 2 years old. 2 years. I sat there reading words that were never meant for me. Inside jokes, nicknames, long paragraphs about how easy it felt with him, how she hadn't felt seen like this in years, how guilty she felt, followed immediately by how alive she felt anyway. One letter ended with, "I hate that this has to be secret, but maybe that's what makes it ours." I stopped reading after that. I didn't need more, but I kept looking anyway. Photos came next. Printed ones. Not digital. Physical proof she'd cared enough to preserve. Them at a cabin I recognized. A place she'd sworn was a girls' weekend. Them at a beach she said she visited with coworkers. Them in a spa robe, glasses of champagne raised, her head tilted toward his shoulder. In every picture she looked relaxed, happy, like she wasn't pretending. That hurt more than anything else. At the bottom of the bag was a folded letter addressed to me, except it wasn't from her. It was from my cousin, dated 6 months ago. He worked in the same company, different department. He wrote that he'd seen Madison and Jason at a spa hotel during a work retreat, that they'd checked in together, that people assumed they were a couple. He said he didn't know how to tell me, that he convinced himself I must already know. I read that letter twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because it explained everything. The distance, the confidence, the way she'd rewritten our marriage while I was still living in it. I packed the envelope back exactly the way I found it. Not out of respect, out of instinct. I wanted to see if she noticed later, if she ever even checked. Then I went to the office. The shared laptop was still there, sitting on the desk like nothing had happened. I opened it without hesitation. The password hadn't changed. She hadn't bothered. Backup chats were saved automatically. She must have forgotten, or assumed I'd never look. Jason's name appeared again and again. Months of conversations, plans, voice notes, inside jokes, complaints about me. One message stuck with me. He's a good man. Just not the one anymore. That was it. No anger. No screaming. Just quiet certainty. I forwarded everything to myself. Every file. Every message. Every image. Then I made a folder and labeled it plainly. Not revenge. Not leverage. Protection. When I finally closed the laptop, the house felt empty in a different way. Not abandoned, exposed. Like a set after the actors leave. I didn't cry. I didn't sit down. I didn't collapse. I stood up, walked into the garage, grabbed contractor bags, and started packing her things. Not carefully. Not angrily. Just efficiently. By the time I finished, the sun was going down. Her life was stacked neatly by the garage wall, reduced to black plastic and silence. I locked the door behind me and left. This time I knew exactly what I was leaving. And for the first time since New Year's Eve, I didn't feel confused. I felt done. There are decisions that feel like explosions. Sudden, loud, impossible to ignore. And then there are decisions that feel like closing a door in a quiet room, alone with no one watching. That was me, the morning after I packed Madison's things into black contractor bags and left them in the garage. No dramatic goodbye. No handwritten notes. No confrontation. I just acted. Not because I didn't care, but because I had finally stopped pretending she still did. I woke up at 6:40 a.m. in a friend's spare bedroom, my body stiff from a couch that didn't like guests. I didn't stretch, didn't shower. I just sat on the edge of the cushions and stared at the floor until I felt ready to move. It hit me slowly. No one was going to fix this for me, and that meant I had to get organized. First, the locks. I pulled up the app for our smart security system, the one I installed 2 years ago after a break-in on our street. She used to laugh about how paranoid I was. "We don't own anything worth stealing," she'd say. Now, I tapped through the settings and scheduled every door code to change by 11 a.m. Next, I opened our joint bank app. I removed her from every account I had access to. The savings, the checking, the emergency fund. Left her the exact amount she entered the marriage with, to the dollar. Not out of pettiness. Just symmetry. Then came the phone plan. Family package. I'd been covering it for 5 years. I contacted the provider, waited on hold for 16 minutes, and finally reached someone who cheerfully asked how they could help today. "I'd like to remove a line from this plan," I said. "Of course. Just need the number." I gave Madison's. There was a pause. "May I ask why you're disconnecting this line?" I smiled, almost amused. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Back at the house, I went straight to the office again. There was no hesitation now. I knew exactly where to look, what to do. The laptop was already clean. But I checked anyway. She hadn't deleted the folder of chats with Jason. Or the emails. She hadn't changed her passwords. It was all still there, wide open. Careless, in a way that felt less like arrogance and more like assumption. Like she'd counted on me never looking. Or never having the nerve to follow through. But she miscalculated. I created a master folder on an external drive labeled with the date. I didn't call it evidence. That felt too confrontational. I named it just in case. Inside were *TS of hotel reservations. Saved chat logs. Her letters. Photos. Voicemails. The letter from my cousin. A copy of the house title. The lease agreements. Tax forms. The prenup. I organized it like I was building a case file. Because, in a way, I was not for revenge. Not even for court. Just for me. For the version of me that might one day wonder if I remembered it right. I did. And now I had proof. By noon, I was gone again. But this time, it wasn't reaction. It was strategy. I booked a room at a mid-range hotel 45 minutes away. I needed distance. Not so much in miles, in clarity. Somewhere I could sit without everything around me whispering her name. I stopped on the way at a drive-thru. Ate in the car. A cheeseburger I didn't taste and fries that went cold before I finished half. I threw the bag in the passenger footwell and stared out the windshield for 10 minutes before driving the last stretch to the hotel. At check-in, the clerk asked, "Business or pleasure?" I just smiled faintly. Neither. The room was sterile. Beige walls, crisp white sheets, A desk that hadn't been written on since the early 2000s. But it was quiet. That mattered. I pulled out my phone and texted 3 people. My best friend, my brother, and my boss. To my friend, taking a break. Might be off-grid for a few days. I'm okay. Just need space. To my brother, heads up, Madison and I are not okay. I'll explain soon. To my boss, need to take some personal time. We'll still meet deadlines. Appreciate your understanding. Then I turned the phone over and let it buzz itself to death. Somewhere around 3 p.m., I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a letter. Not a journal. Just a list. What I lost. My wife. My best friend. My house, even if I stayed. My peace. Time. Trust. What I still have. My name. My career. My instincts. My dignity. People who still see me. Time, the one thing that always keeps going. I stared at that last one. Time. I kept thinking about how she used hers. How she spent it with someone else. Then came home and slept beside me. Ate meals I cooked. Watched shows I suggested. Sat next to me on couches I picked out and told me she was tired. Maybe she was. Maybe carrying 2 lives is exhausting. But I wasn't tired anymore. I was awake. And nothing burns quite like clarity. Later that night, around 7:30, my phone lit up. Her name. I didn't answer. She called again at 8:15. I still didn't answer. At 9:02, a text came through. Where are you? I didn't reply. A minute later, why did the house locks change? Then, I can't get into the bank. What's happening? Finally, Brandon, seriously. This isn't funny. She was right. It wasn't. It was never funny. At 10:17 p.m., she sent one more message. If you're trying to scare me, congratulations. I'm scared. Can we please talk? I turned the phone off. Somewhere between midnight and 2 a.m. I stood by the hotel window, looking at the empty parking lot and thinking how surreal it was to be so calm. I expected anger, rage, some primal scream, but what I felt wasn't fire. It was exit. I was already halfway gone. My body just hadn't caught up yet. And now that I had proof, not guesses, not suspicion, but real, undeniable proof, I didn't need her explanation. She could keep her stories, her timelines, her selective memories. I had the truth, and I had a plan. I would not argue. I would not beg. I would not scream in a driveway while neighbors peeked through blinds. I would simply remove myself from her reach, from her excuses, from the gravity of her lies. No grand finale, just a man reclaiming his silence. The next morning, I woke to a message that made my chest tighten before I even opened it. It was from her sister, Claire. We'd always been cordial, never especially close. She was younger than Madison by 4 years and lived out in Virginia with her husband and 2 kids. We saw each other maybe twice a year, holidays, birthdays. She always struck me as someone who noticed more than she let on. The message said, "You know about the lake house party, right?" That was it. No hey, no lead-in. I just stared at it for a while, blinking through the haze of a night with no real sleep. Eventually I replied, "No. What lake house?" Her answer came 30 seconds later. Back in September, Jason rented a cottage near Smith Mountain Lake. There was a party, weekend thing. Madison came. Everyone there thought they were a couple. I sat up slowly, the kind of slow you move when your body already knows the truth and just needs your mind to catch up. She told me it was a tech conference, I typed. Said she'd be in Richmond all weekend. Claire replied, "I didn't know what to say at the time. I figured, maybe you two were open? Or maybe you knew and didn't care." That part stung. People assumed I knew. They saw my wife playing girlfriend to another man and thought, well, maybe that's just their thing. Like I had stepped so far out of my own life that strangers couldn't tell whether I was in on the act or not. I called her. Claire answered on the second ring, her voice already strained. "Brandon, I'm so sorry. I should have said something earlier." I rubbed my forehead. "So tell me everything now." She exhaled hard. "Okay, so, Jason's had this cottage for a while. He rents it out but keeps a few weekends blocked for himself. Back in September, they had a big gathering, him, some work friends, a few mutuals. I wasn't supposed to be there, but one of my old friends invited me last minute. She didn't know Madison was your wife until I said something. I closed my eyes. What happened at the party? They were together. I don't know how else to say it. Not hiding it. Holding hands, laughing, cooking together. She introduced him as a close family friend. But everyone knew. And you didn't tell me then? I froze, Brandon. I kept telling myself maybe you already knew. That maybe you two were separated quietly. It didn't make sense, but I didn't want to blow up your life if I was wrong. You weren't wrong. There was a silence on the line, long enough that I thought she might have hung up. I'm sorry, she said again, quieter this time. I didn't want to believe it either. I love Madison. But she's been off for a while. Distant. Cold. Even with me. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. This wasn't a one-night mistake. It wasn't some emotional accident that just happened. It was structured, thought through, sustained. And it wasn't even hidden well. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I hung up and sat in the hotel chair, one hand on my knee, the other pressed to my forehead, as if maybe I could hold my brain together long enough to stop it from fracturing. She had built a double life. A second relationship. Weekend trips, lake houses, full days spent walking in sunlight with another man while I stayed home thinking she was out there chasing her career. I had been covering for her, absorbing her mood swings, apologizing for fights I didn't start, telling people she was just tired or under pressure at work. Meanwhile, she was introducing Jason to strangers as her partner. At a lake house, with guests, and food, and sunlight. There was something about that broke me differently. I could have handled a cheap affair, the kind that hides in hotel rooms and ends before dawn. But this was domestic. She'd taken him into her life, and left me waiting at home. I tried to remember that weekend. September. I had stayed home sick. Nothing serious, just a bad cold and a worse mood. I remember her leaning over the bed that Friday morning, brushing her fingers against my forehead. You'll be fine, she'd said, kissing me lightly. I'll text you when I land. I remember feeling grateful that she still cared. I remember telling her to crush the conference and to bring back those weird truffle snacks she liked from that one airport kiosk. She laughed, said, I'll see what I can do. She never brought back the snacks. Never brought back anything. Because she hadn't gone to Richmond. She went to Virginia, yes, but not to a conference. She went to the lake. With Jason. The idea of her packing for that trip, folding sweaters into a duffel bag, choosing outfits based on his preferences, maybe even packing his favorite wine, it made my stomach turn. That was the moment I knew. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd replaced me. That's what no one tells you about infidelity. It's not the S*X. It's the int* Macy. It's the jokes, the meals, the small domestic rituals. She used to call me when she landed somewhere. Used to send me photos of her hotel view. Used to bring back those cheap hotel pens I liked to use. Stupid stuff. Little things. Now someone else had that. I didn't know what to do with the information. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt erased. I opened my laptop and added another folder to the external drive. Timeline cross-references. Inside, I dropped a photo from her Instagram in September. Blurry trees, a lakeside view, no people. Caption, conference vibes sparkles. A screenshot *T of her calendar entry for that weekend. Color-coded as out of office. A forwarded email from Claire with the lake house name and Airbnb link. A group photo Claire sent, showing Madison in the background holding a red cup, Jason next to her with a hand on her lower back. I kept building the case, because at that point it wasn't just about grief. It was about clarity. I needed to see it, laid out, structured, real. Otherwise, I knew my brain would twist it, try to shrink it down into something forgivable, something survivable. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a campaign. And I had been the only one without a map. 2 days later, she came back. No warning, no text. Just a knock at the front door around noon. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, no makeup, Hoodie pulled over hair I didn't recognize as hers. And a bag. Not a suitcase. A backpack. Like she thought she was staying. She tried the keypad. It blinked red. Then she knocked. Not frantic. Just expecting. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Her eyes looked tired. Hollow. I just want to talk, she said, her voice too soft. I handed her a box, the one I'd packed with her letters, receipts, photos, and printed messages. She looked at it, confused, then opened the top and saw. She looked up fast, face flushed. You went through my stuff? I read everything, I said flatly. Your parents know. Claire knows. Your job probably will soon. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'm not here to yell, I added. But you don't live here anymore. Brandon, you don't get to talk anymore, I said quietly. You made choices. You lied. For years. Tears welled up, but I didn't flinch. She stepped back. I shut the door. Didn't slam it. Just shut it. And locked it behind me. That night, I got an email from her HR department. Short, professional. Thank you for your cooperation. An internal review is now underway. Apparently, forwarding those documents worked. Jason was suspended. Madison, probably under review too. I didn't ask. I didn't care. She sent one message, hours later. Just 5 words. I ruined everything. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't ache. I turned on the lights on the Christmas tree, the one still standing, half decorated from when we were pretending things were fine. The gifts were still there. I hadn't opened any of mine. I didn't need to. I already got what I wanted. Peace. And no one could take that from me now.